Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman, then followed by our state treasurer, Beth Pearce. And then we'll get an overview of ways of how people can get volunteer and become involved in the campaigns here in Lamoille County by Marissa Owens. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, which is Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman. Lieutenant Governor has held many positions, both in the multiple terms of the State House, of the State Senate. He's completing a second term as Lieutenant Governor. He won our primary in August and is doing a great job. He's a leader on climate change. He certainly understands the importance of common sense issues like raising the minimum wage, properly funding our state colleges, and many other issues which are really important to Vermonters. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Democratic candidate for governor, David Zuckerman.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you everyone for being here, and anybody else who's watching on live streams and so forth. Please reach out if anything doesn't get addressed today. Please go to zuckerman4vt.com and you can email us any questions you've got that you want me to answer. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to be the Democratic nominee. It's obviously been a very different campaign than most that we're used to, with no door knocking and a lot of the real face-to-face time that we get at the summer festivals or the weekly festival down in Johnson. That's always so good, the music festival, and opportunities around the state to meet people and listen to people. But we've been getting out and about through public Zoom calls. We've had telephone town halls. We just had one in Lamoille County a couple nights ago last week. And we're reaching quite a few folks, and there's a lot of support out there. And there's, a lot of appreciation for how well the state is doing with COVID-19, and that appreciation extends everywhere from the governor, but also appropriately to Dr. Levine, who I think has been a real steady rock in our state with science and medicine at the core of our decisions, as well as the citizens of Vermont, who really stepped up and looked out for our neighbors, put on masks, spaced distance appropriately, and really put life on pause in order to not lose lives. And I really appreciate all Vermonters for doing what we can for each other, and a lot of great mutual aid efforts as well. But we have to do more than just handle COVID well. We have had a governor that in the prior 3 years, 3.5 years, really coasted on the good economy and got in the way of some of those common sense and democratic priority bills that Bruce mentioned. He vetoed minimum wage twice. He vetoed paid family leave. He's vetoed the medical monitoring bill for toxic polluters to pay for the pollution and the health monitoring for people who are affected by it. And he vetoed a 24-hour waiting period for purchasing guns to protect vulnerable Vermonters who are inclined towards suicide or situations of domestic violence. And when you really look at all those bills, his veto of those bills are completely counter to his narrative of protecting our most vulnerable. Today, had he not vetoed the minimum wage bill 3 years ago, our essential workers would be making $2,000 more this year. So there's some real differences. My administration would be not only working to handle COVID in a safe way as we have, and to work with Vermont citizens to continue to be safe as we move forward, but also to rebuild our economy in a vision for the future. I entered this race because of income and economic inequality and the struggles in our rural areas. And then it was only exacerbated by COVID, and the disparities and the struggles were really highlighted by COVID. And then, of course, just as it was starting, the shoe dropped that the state colleges would potentially close 3 campuses, including one right there in Lamoille County. And it was remarkable to me when the governor basically shrugged and said, well, maybe we just open. I mean, to me, that the epitome of lack of vision and lack of understanding how critical those state college campuses are, not only to the economy of the various campus regions, but also to the hope for Vermonters, to working class Vermonters who are trying to get a leg up in life, get that first step out into higher education. Those opportunities are through our state colleges. And I want to, of course, commend, I think we've got 2 representatives on the line right now, Dave Zuckerman and Dan Noyes, and other colleagues who voted for the House budget to actually fund the bridge funding for the state colleges. To not put that money in the budget was a complete throwaway to the state colleges that the governor proposed. Who's going to come to a state college with the understanding that it may not even make it through the full year, or that the state isn't supportive of it to try to get it back on its feet? I mean, that's the quickest way to end those 3 fine institutions. And so, as governor, I will make sure we find a way to keep those institutions open, because that's what public and governments do. We make sure there are opportunities for people to thrive and survive and do better for their future. And we have to take on the climate crisis, which is just on hold during COVID, but it's still there. And we need to invest in efforts to get working class people's homes weatherized, fixed income seniors' homes weatherized. We need to be putting up broadband so rural areas have adequate and better than adequate education and economic opportunities. But if we don't invest and build this infrastructure, then we're going to have more problems after COVID that we won't have addressed because there's no vision in the governor's office. And I want to wrap before I answer questions by just really pointing out that without building forward, without thinking forward, this governor set us up for some of the challenges we're in. Paid family leave would have alleviated some of the stress on the unemployment system, and he vetoed it. And the question is, can we rub our belly and tap our head at the same time? Can we take care of the present and think for the future? As a farmer, that's what I do all the time. I'm growing crops this year, and I'm trying to build the soil healthier for next year. And if we can't do both of those things, then we will always be in trauma and reaction mode and not in building for a better future mode. And I think we can and must do both. And I think it's critically important to also recognize that the governor of Vermont, I mean, I want to ask everyone here, raise your hand if you are paying attention to the federal race with Biden and Harris against Trump, and the U.S. Senate with Mitch McConnell and the balance of power in the Senate. Who here is paying attention and supported and really pushing hard to hope the Democrats take the Senate? Think about the fact that COVID can strike anyone. We've already had House members with COVID. It could strike any senator. The governor of Vermont for the next 2 years would be in charge of appointing a replacement if either of our senators was struck with COVID or some other reason they couldn't finish their term. So right now, the national races for Senate indicate it's going to be maybe tied. We might have a 1-vote majority based on Governor Scott or Governor Zuckerman. Because I think those of us that are thinking about the courts, that are thinking about women's reproductive freedom, that are thinking about corporate power and personhood, all of these issues are in the balance in the courts. And we cannot afford for one more appointee of this president or a good appointee of the next president to be blocked for 4 years for them to try to get that power back. So I'd love to answer questions if people want to throw them at me. They could be logistics about how we're going to win. They could be about any issue you want. Folks who know me know that I'll take any question and let you know what I think.
Okay, let's open it up. Anybody have a question? Don't be shy.
So I just want to ask, if I may, what your take is on the Global Warming Solutions Act. I know it passed. I'm very happy about that. Unfortunately, our representative voted against it, of course, and put out the typical Republican talking points. What do you think Scott is gonna do, and you see an opportunity there to draw some stark differences between you and Scott. I just read some, actually, in international papers about how climate change can be one of those issues that bridges the divide between Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, I fully support the Global Warming Solutions Act. I was a environmental activist, student we have to set concrete goals that the public can hold us accountable through the other branches of government if we won't do the job. And we haven't been doing the job, which is why we're in the trouble we're in right now. My brother lives in San Francisco, and the other day he sent me a text and said, we looked for how far we would have to drive to have air that was not heated. It was 150 miles to the east, 250 miles to the south, and 1,500 miles to the north. Fires in California, hurricanes in the Gulf and across through the Atlantic are all at record. We've had 100-degree temperatures in Siberia, and I can tell you as a farmer here, when we had 100 degrees multiple days in June, and even close to it or over it in May, that is terrible for little crops. And it really, we struggled with the dry season this year, as many farmers have. So we have to tackle the climate crisis because it's our future. It's agriculture, it's weather, it's food, it's foliage, it's maple, it's ski season. You know, whether you look at it economically or just basic sustenance of life, it is a critical issue, and there is no way that we should be vetoing or slowing down our actions towards progress on these bills.
Anybody else have a question?
And go Joe Sable, by the way, up there in your neck of the
And Kate
Yeah, we're
Donnelly.
doing our best.
Kate Donnelly is also running for the first time for a House seat.
Okay, right on. Where are you running? Sorry.
I'm running in the Lamoille County District 2, so that's Belvedere, Johnson, Hyde Park, and Wolcott.
Oh, right, with Dan. Yeah.
I have the pleasure of having Dan as my running partner.
Nice.
Very grateful to Dan. He's a great guy.
I think it's the other way around.
It's been good. I've been very blessed. And thanks for coming to our area virtually and chatting with us. I have a question for you in my role as a mom and a parent and a human in the context of being in a family with young children during COVID times. So we're very lucky, my wife and I, in many respects. We have our house and we have our job. But managing the pandemic with young children is incredibly challenging. And one of the areas that's come up for us is that with schools being in hybrid mode, our school-age child is able to go to school 2 days a week, but we've had to find childcare the other days of the week. And, you know, I don't know how many other folks on this call have young kids and are sort of the cost of childcare right now, but essentially for us that means having to pay almost an additional mortgage a month for a child that we budgeted for to be in public school, right? So the financial impact is significant. And again, you know, like we are lucky and we can find ways to make this work, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, you know, I think about other families in our state, I think about other families in my community and how people are doing this. And it's not sustainable in my mind financially for so many families. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on how you would support parents, guardians, families in the context of COVID, considering everything that they're taking on right now?
Well, I think there's a range of things. One of the ideas I've been thinking about had to do with the opening of the schools and how we have this very patchwork, different systems all over the state that are really antithetical to a synchronized system, which by that, what I mean is, had we as a state said, all right, let's figure out a model that we will use across the state. And if it was all certain letters of the alphabet are in school Monday and Tuesday, and the other letters are Thursday and Friday, then employers would know which of their employees would be working on which days of the week. Parents could coordinate with other parents, with other by alphabet, and say, can we be a pod? And we'll watch your kids those days, and you watch our kids another day. I mean, while we go through COVID, it's a whole different circumstance than in normal economic times when we still also had challenging situations with childcare, and we need more childcare financial support, and we need better systems. But when you have such disparate systems town by town, there's really it's very difficult for folks to plan with neighbors or maybe a coworker or others to create safe pods for caring for each other's kids, which is not ideal. But we could also look to many of those folks who are unemployed right now and say, are you interested in being a pod? And there's we have to be creative outside the norms of what we would normally expect in terms of some of the standards and the requirements. But we also need to, I just want to, by the way, throw a thanks to Senator Leahy, because one of the things that the governor has gotten a lot of credit for is doing all these different things during COVID and holding the economy together and budgeting the way that he's budgeted. Of course, the legislature, I think, really filled in all the holes of Swiss cheese in the way he budgeted. But Senator Leahy secured the small state support. And I think, Dave, you're on appropriations, if I'm not mistaken, or you were. As much as $500 million of the $1.2 billion in COVID relief money is thanks to Senator Leahy's small state minimum. Imagine where we'd be without that. So I know they've opened up a number of regional childcare hubs, but they're still not enough. And I'm also open to ideas. One of the unfortunate aspects of this administration, in my opinion, and I would operate very differently, is that I've had one face-to-face meeting with the governor in the last 4 years for 30 minutes. And during the beginning of COVID, I offered to stand with the governor at his early press conferences to say, look, this is nonpartisan. I'm behind you 100% in the statements you're going to need to make and in the challenges we're going to face as a state, and I would stand with you. And his people said, that won't be necessary. And then partly I'm answering your question with this information because I've also asked to be briefed on what he's doing or what's happening with COVID and outbreaks and information. And they have not included me in a single briefing for the last 6 months. And one of the things that you need to do as governor is, as he says, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Well, one of the worst things that would happen would be for the governor to no longer be able to govern. Whether I agree with him or not on things, that would be a horrible circumstance for sudden transition. But what you need to do to prepare for it is make sure the line of succession is also fully informed and involved when you're in a time of crisis for the state, regardless of whatever letters after someone's name. And I bring all that together because in dealing with the childcare crisis, how many voices from childcare were at the table as they came up with their plans? Teachers asked to be involved with the opening of schools. They were excluded from being at the table in figuring that out. In a Zuckerman administration, you would have people at the table who have the experience on the ground level. It wouldn't be Mike Smith has all the answers. It wouldn't be Governor Scott has all the answers because no one person does. So I would look for ideas as well and would look for them from you as well, Kate, if you've got ideas.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a
question? I went on a
question?
tangent and I apologize, but it sort of got me going.
Well, I think you bring up an excellent point in terms of, a lot of people have praised Governor Scott in his role in handling the COVID pandemic in Vermont. But my understanding is that the legislature passed legislation this past spring that gave Secretary of State Condos and Governor Scott the ability to institute vote by mail if they both agreed. Well, you know, to do that, that takes a lot of planning. It's much different. You just can't like flick a switch and have it happen. So the Governor Scott was just saying, well, we'll wait and see how it is in, you know, in the fall. Well, you can't wait that long. You have to get involved. And finally, the legislature just gave the Secretary of State the ability to do that. That was good.
Right.
But now we hear that Republicans are suing Secretary of State Condos for implementing vote by mail. And I don't know about you, but I haven't heard anything from Governor Scott. And, you know, this is something that increases turnout, that it's safe for the voting public, especially in a state where Vermont, where so many of the people are over 65. I just wonder what comments you might have on that situation.
Well, again, I do appreciate Governor Scott as an individual and a person, but I completely disagree with his efforts to sort of satiate both camps with a foot on each side of this issue. He'll say, well, you know, there isn't really any proof of fraud, and he's sort of quiet about it. He will very gently distance himself from President Trump, which is a pretty easy thing to do. I mean, who wants to be near that type of governance, that kind of governance? But as a Republican, he really had the ability, and as a reasonable Republican, to organize and say, this is not the Republican Party. These kinds of fights against participation in democracy are not what we do as Republicans. This kind of language coming out of the president is not what we do as Republicans. But he won't do that because he still needs the votes of those people that are voting for Trump and that are the right-wing domination of the Republican Party in this state to win. And if he was truly reasonable, I mean, Jim Jeffords saw this 20, 25 years ago and left the party. But, you know, Phil Scott is saying, well, that's not the party that I'm a part of, but it's my label after my name. You know, it's a little bit of this habit both ways. And, you know, voting is so critical this year. I mean, we all know that truly, if this president is reelected, he will be emboldened to be even worse than he's been with respect to tearing our country apart. And there are Republicans who are voting against Trump. There's the Lincoln Project. There's all these organizations coming out firmly against Trump that are from Republican backgrounds. Where is our governor in joining that? He isn't. And he isn't because he needs the RGA money to run his race, because he's not running for governor during this crisis when many other governors, Republicans and Democrats, can somehow manage to both manage COVID and stand for re-election and debate the issues. We thankfully will have a couple debates, but other than that, you know, he's not participating in campaigning other than 2 press conferences a week that are kind of well beyond what's necessary at this point with respect to managing COVID. But vote by mail is proven, safe. Like you said, it takes time to make sure it's done right. You don't just flick a switch when it's the importance of keeping, you know, one person, one vote. No, he's been very quiet when it comes to these critical issues.
Thank you. We have Barry Gladstone. Would you like to ask a question?
Sure, it's Barry, and
Barry, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's okay for not having my picture. My computer doesn't seem to be doing that right now. But anyway, I wanted to ask Lieutenant Governor, I'm really, really, really concerned about housing, about affordable housing, about homelessness, about people who can't make a living wage, can't afford to rent or buy. And it's very serious. And I think food issues are important, but you can get food. Food is available. I volunteer at 2 food shelves and a breakfast program. Food is there if anybody wants to come, but housing is not. And I just feel like there needs to be more of an aggressive approach. So I wonder what your aggressive approach.
Sure. Well, thank you, Barry. And I couldn't agree more. In fact, it's one of the keystones of my Green New Deal plan that I've been talking about for a couple of years now, that under the Trump tax cuts, the wealthiest 5% got a couple $100 million tax break every year in Vermont. I would say let's sequester half of that resource and put it into up to $20 million a year for broadband, weatherization of low income and fixed income and seniors' homes, and 20 million a year into affordable housing to leverage private, nonprofit, and federal money as well to build low-income housing and affordable housing, not even just say low income, but affordable housing and efficient housing in our town and village centers, so we can actually rebuild our village towns and town centers so that the coffee shop will have enough people to exist. The town store will have enough people living and working in town, buying sandwiches at lunch to have your county or town stores exist. We have this incredible pressure right now of Southern New England folks buying up properties in Vermont. You can sell a 2,000 square foot home in suburban Boston for, 7, 800, $1.2 million. And you come up here and you can buy a 2,000 square foot home with a couple of acres, for $400,000 or whatnot, which is a huge amount of money when you're working on minimum wage jobs, again, that the governor vetoed, but it's not a huge amount of money to folks moving in from out of state. So we're in the full regional capitalist housing market. And unless we as a state decide building affordable housing is a critical piece of the future to make sure working class Vermonters can stay a part of our fabric, we are going to have huge problems, as you point out. And unless people are willing to stand up and say, "Yep, this is where we need to spend money," and we need wealthy people who benefited from 40 years of top-down tax cuts for the wealthy, we're going to continue to lose working class Vermonters, and that's a real shame.
I appreciate this is Barry again. I appreciate your comments, and you are talking to the choir or whatever that term is. But my concern is nothing seems to get done unless there's some sort of coalition, of resources and smart people getting together and organizations and landlords and, all of the people who are part of what makes housing. And so I wondered, what sort of plan would you use? I know you can't do it all by yourself.
No.
How would you go about that, or who would you include?
Well, you're right. And then I probably, unfortunately, have to leave after this question because I'm supposed to go to another county, which is the one benefit of Zoom. I can zip from one county to another like Harry Potter. But there's no doubt you have to build the coalition, bring people together. I mean, we have many, many housing advocates in Vermont, many nonprofits. We have VHCB. We have an incredibly robust majority in the House and the Senate, where even if we were to lose a few here or there on some of these kinds of issues and votes, I do believe we could put together majority votes when it comes to housing and progressive taxation to have the resources necessary to help struggling Vermonters and tackle the climate crisis. You're absolutely right. We'd have to bring together, folks from the designated agencies about how do we address the fundamental issues around economic struggles that people are facing. I was talking with Doug Racine, who's also endorsed me just yesterday, about some of the ways we could work in AHS to break down silos between programs, as well as silos between the Agency of Human Services and the designated agencies and the schools and the corrections facilities, where we could actually have wrap around, 2, 3, 4 people, work with someone who needs support to make sure they don't fall through the crack because they get the help in one direction, but then get thrown back in because they make one parole violation. These are systemic challenges that need someone who's going to roll up their sleeves, bring in people from all the different silos, break down the barriers, and get to the root causes of some of the recidivism rates, some of the economic treadmill rates that people have. And we've gone backwards. Our state used to be 5th in the country in infant mortality in 2015, and now we're 34th. And that's during the Scott administration. I don't know who's more vulnerable than infants. So I am going to wrap so that we can move on, and you can move on to Beth. I see Tim's post right there, so it's a good signal to segue out. But thank you, and please reach out to the campaign, as Dan put in the chat section, if you want to help. Spreading the word is really critical. There's a lot of Dems that could go either way, and we have to remind them that it's not just COVID time, it's minimum wage, it's the climate crisis, it's paid family leave, it's all of these critical issues to invest. It's our state colleges. I mean, anybody who lives in Lamoille County that says Phil Scott's done a fine job when he would have let Johnson close is beyond beyond me that that's a possibility that they could vote for Phil Scott. So please remind your neighbors, get out the vote, and we can win this thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Governor. We really appreciate you coming to our meeting tonight, and we wish you all the luck, and we'll do everything we can to get you elected.
And everyone on this call too, they'll get all three of them elected too.
Oh, absolutely.
Or Joe
Okay.
Sable's here now, right? Or was. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Our next speaker is our state treasurer, Beth Pearce. She's been our treasurer since 2011. She's really the stalwart who keeps an eye on our finances, makes sure that the state pensions are paid, makes sure that our bond rating is good. She does a lot of great stuff, and she is recognized by her colleagues across the country. She's the immediate past president of the National Association of Comptrollers and State Treasurers. I mean, I think that's really a recognition of the quality of the work that she does for us here in Vermont. Beth, your turn.
Well, thank you very much. It is good to see you folks, even if it's through Zoom. I'd love to get there in person as soon as we can. And thank you for all you're doing. I want to say thank you first to the essential workers that are out there day in, day out, taking care of business and keeping the economy moving for all of us, making sure that we have the goods that we need, the public service that we need, and keeping things moving. So thank you for all those folks. Thank you for teachers who are on the front lines there, and childcare workers. Thank you so much. I also want to say thank you to this committee. You've done a great job. It's tough in this new election format to get out there and figure out what we're going to be doing to get that message out. But you are getting the message out, and very, very much appreciate that. And two other thanks, I guess I'll do. One is to Jim Condos and what he's done in terms of voting. Everyone needs to have their voice, and I really thank Jim for his work on that. And just want to say thank you to Dan and Dave for what they're doing in the legislature. You're probably sick of Zoom at this point in time, folks. You've been on there for hours upon hours, and it's a tough job. And for those who want to do that tough job, just thank you, and whatever we can do to help you get elected, we're looking forward to that. So the treasurer's office is about a number of things. We do a number of essential tasks with the state's banker. We invest the state's funds. We do not invest the pension funds directly. I'm part of a committee, one member of 7 that on that committee. But the staff that manage the transaction, the custodial work, does report to me, and so we have a lot to do with that. We manage the retirement for over 50,000 people, active, vested, and retired members of the state, the teachers, and the municipal plan. So those are important tasks, and we do all the reconciliation that has to come with that. We do the state's debt issuance once the legislature approves the amount of money, and we actually make a recommendation on that to the legislature. And since 1989, I believe the legislature has never exceeded that recommendation. So keep that in mind, Dan and Dave, when we get to the next session. But that's all part of what we do. But for me, pulling that all together, what's the central theme? And for me, the central theme in our office is that every single person in this state has an opportunity for a lifetime of financial well-being. You want it for yourself. You want it for your family. You want it for your neighbors. I want it for every single person in this state, every person, including marginalized folks that haven't had that opportunity. We need to pull that together as a state and make it work. And to do that, we need a number of things. We need economic justice. We need social justice. We need to deal with the issues of systemic racism. We need to have a society that recognizes that everyone is a part of that and should be treated with dignity and respect. Now, what we have in many cases is just the opposite. What we have is a situation where folks think that bottom line, because I'm all about the bottom line, and the treasurer's office is about the bottom line, but it's seen as that's cut, so that we can have a lower amount of expenditures. And that's the way we get to a better bottom line. That's not how we get to a bottom line that's useful and helpful for everybody. Every single person in this state should have a part of that bottom line. And that's how you do it, through investment. And you invest in the state, you invest in your people to make that work. I use an example when we were talking about clean water a few years back, and the report that we did. And if you got a company that makes widgets, okay, I don't even know if a widget exists, but let's use that example. If you have a company that makes widgets, you make sure you invest in the widget machine, because if the widget machine doesn't work, you can't make widgets. So we have to invest in things like clean water. We have to invest in childcare. We have to invest in housing, because when you invest in those things, you take care of those needs so that you can continue doing the good work of government. And for me, promoting that and working with our partners, working with the legislature, working with the administration to make sure that we do those kind of things is so important. That's what affordability really means. It means investing in your community. Now, you talked about housing a little while ago, and I very much appreciate what you were talking about, Barry. We need to have housing for people that are marginalized, people that have income issues, and we need to have housing for those folks that come out of school or technical school or college, or come out of the college that right down the road from you. They have to have housing. And that's if you get out of college and you don't have, or secondary school, post-secondary, and you don't have adequate housing, the stock is in pretty bad shape. The cost of that stock is very high. And, you end up with, if you're 25, or 24, 23, without the ability to have a decent life here, because you don't have paid family leave. You don't have minimum wage. You don't have child care. You don't have adequate housing. When you do that and you look at our benefit structure, how do we keep the youth here? We can't unless we invest in our communities, unless we invest in our people. We can't do that. So for me, that's the central issue of what we're all about, making sure that everyone has that opportunity, making sure that we have this type of government here that works together. I think David made a great analogy when he talked about the soil. You have to harvest your crop, and then you have to reinvest in the soil so that you have a crop the next year. We need to do that. And we need to take a look at the issues of COVID and say, we're not getting back to normal when this is done. We need to get back to that new normal that brings in every citizen, that there are no marginalized folks, that we get folks together to make sure that we have the kind of society that we want. Now, to do that, we need a couple of things. Number one, in Washington, we need to get rid of Donald Trump. Okay, it's as simple as that. I have trouble just calling him the president because he is shameful. And he's ruined all of us and what folks think of us all across the world. The violence, the vitriol, the racism, he promotes that. And we need to remove that from our government because it's just wrong. It's shameful. And we need to elect Joe Biden and Senator Harris to be our next president and vice president so we can change that story. We need to have a Senate that has a majority, the U.S. Senate, so that we can get things done. We need to make sure that at the national level, we take care of that. So vote, vote, vote. Now, I will tell you that I was I endorsed Bernie. And I did a lot of door-to-door in New Hampshire for him, and a lot of phone calls, and a little bit of mud and rain in the process. But I still believe that we need to change the climate down in Washington. And to do that, we need to elect Joe Biden. I feel very comfortable that he has those values. I know that Bernie's endorsed him. We've got to get everybody say, yes, get out to vote. Just as we did this last time in the primary here when 170,000 people stepped up to the plate and voted. So those are the kind of things that we need to do at the national level. At the state level, we need to make sure that we elect folks so that we can have not just a majority, but a super majority so that we can get things done and move our agenda forward. I'm so pleased with the Global Warming Solutions Act. I did testify on that because I see that as part of the economy and building the economy and attracting businesses to here. And I know that a couple of the rating agencies are doing the same thing. They're measuring that as a part of their look at the economic outlook for our state. So that's get together, that's invest in our communities. I'd like to address, as say, Barry, in the housing issue. For me, that's extraordinarily important. We did a housing study early in the year. We put that in January of 15 before COVID. it. And we had public hearings and we had meetings that we attended. In one of those meetings, a woman who was homeless came and talked about her perspective. So we put in that first report, but we said that's not good enough. That report talked about funding, and we need to fund VHCB, bottom line. But we need to take a look at how we meet the needs of individuals with disabilities, people that have discrimination in housing. We need to take a look and help individuals across the board get affordable housing. And our next approach, our intent was to issue something in March after a series of public hearings. We still intend to work on that so that we can look at the financing and how we get to better housing. Now, one of the things you talked about in the Global Warming Solutions Act was about bringing a coalition together, and that's something Dave mentioned. When we did the Clean Water Report in 2017 and gave recommendations on funding and financing that, we had 23 hearings, public meetings to get input from over 1,000 people. That's how you build Vermont. That's how you build coalitions. And we as Democrats recognize that value. We work together to make sure that we have an inclusive party that recognizes the needs of every single person in Vermont. I'm proud to be a Vermonter. I'm proud to be in the Treasurer's office. It has been the greatest honor I have had in my career, and I've had 43 years in government service, to be your treasurer. And I want to continue that so we can do the good work of the Treasurer's office. We can get rid of those folks in DC that are causing so much problem, the divisiveness. We can bring together people in Vermont for a better Vermont, past the COVID, into the new normal that recognizes every single person in the state as part of our group effort and part of our community. So that's what we're about in the Treasurer's office. I'm very proud of the work, and we've done that with you as partners. We've done that with Dan and Dave in the legislature. We've done that with the state committee and the democratic values and your committee, your county committee, about getting the message out about those values. We need to continue that work. It's going to be a tough election period because we have new things that we have to do and new ways of reaching out. But that voice is important. Thank you for what you do to make that voice, get that voice out there. So thank you. I get kind of excited about all these things. It's the best job in the state. Don't tell the others that. But I love it. We need to do all we can for retirement security. That's important. The issue of pensions came up earlier. And we need to make sure we have that. And thank you, to, Kate, for talking about childcare. We need to fund it. We need to be able to have a society that funds our basic needs and doesn't play off competition between all those needs, whether it's, playing off housing to childcare or something like that. We need to do all of it for our citizens. And you do that by investing in your community and growing your community in the process. So thank you very much. I'll stop there and I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, Dan Iacovone has his hand raised. Dan?
Hey.
Bruce, thank you. Boy, to my friends on the Lamoille County Democrats, don't we have an incredible state treasurer? I just think we're blessed in many ways to have somebody who can do what we need. So having said that, though, I'm not going to go easy on you, Beth.
That's all right.
But I'm looking for your advice. So we need money for childcare, no doubt about it. Where does it come from? So we need money for our Vermont State colleges, no doubt about that. Where does that come from? So we need money for our pensions to stabilize them, no doubt about that. Where does it come from? So we need money, and you go right down the list. Barry spoke so eloquently to housing. Where does it come from? So as a state legislator, am I wrong, Beth, or do you have another solution? Am I wrong to ask for a 1% surcharge on the wealthiest 1% of Vermont to try to recapture some of that over $100 million in tax breaks that group of folks, good Vermonters, have received from the Trump tax credits to fund these good things? Or is that just old-fashioned liberalism that there's no place for? What's the solution for making those investments, Beth? Can you help me?
Sure. Well, it's a two-pronged approach. One is smart finance and taking a look at what you're doing and making sure we put our resources where we need to be. I'll go back to my discussion about the widget machine, okay? You have to do the right things to keep that machine going, but you also don't need to you need to make sure you have a balance in what you're doing and how you work with folks. You want to make sure that the employee that's managing that widget machine also has a decent life, also has minimum wage or more than minimum wage, and has all the benefits that they have. You can do that by doing some smart finance, taking a look at what we're doing. One of the things I'll get to is VHCB. In the housing report, we took a look at their appropriation and what the statutory requirement for it. And what we ended up seeing was that every year there's a statute that says this is how much goes to VHCB. And every year, I don't have quite the language that's used, but it's notwithstanding any law to the contrary. And we end up shorting them. And if we didn't short them, we would have done half of the goals that folks gave us in terms of the 1,000 units over, I believe, a 5-year period, and get that done through good financing. When we put it in the capital bill, which is where we put it, we do a couple of things. Number one, we're using those dollars that are best for infrastructure in long-term, bricks and mortar that are, we need in terms of our schools and energy improvements in our schools and our buildings. We cut that short, and we pay more interest in doing that. So we need to take a look at how we do that. We need revenue overhaul. There's no ifs and buts about it. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I'm the tax expert on this state, but we do need to have overhaul of our taxing system. We do need to use smart financing. It's not going to be one or the other. It's going to be both, and taking a look at what we can do to lower the cost of doing those things. As I said, in clean water, we're able to do some things that will lower the cost. If you do it now, remember the old adage on a couple of commercials, pay me now or pay me later. If we wait, for instance, in clean water or our bridges years back, if we wait and don't take care of them now, it costs more down the road. So making sure that we do that. And Dave, to your point, it's wrong to play off childcare to housing to other service needs or individuals with disabilities. We can work together to find solutions. It's a balancing act between revenues and how we do our financing, and make sure that we do it smart and do it right. We have a program called, I know I'm going on here, but we have a program called 10% in Vermont. And what we do is we say, we're not going to send all the dollars to Wall Street. We're going to take those dollars that we have that can be a little longer in maturity, 5 to 7 years, and we put them into housing and energy. We put some into childcare. And I remember being at the Stars and Stripe Parade, and there was a float in front of me with a lot of bouncing kids. And I was glad I was not on that float, because that's not my best skill. But what the lady told me is that they got their money from the Community Loan Fund. And we provided them the loan to help them to go out and do daycare. We did that with with our working lands. We've done that in so many ways. We can be smart in how we invest back in our communities with our dollars and leverage that to do a better Vermont. That's one of the things that we can continue to do and grow in our process. So I know it's a long thing, Dave, and I'm sorry about that, but I get excited and I think of all the different pieces. So thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question?
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave and Dan, for what you've been doing. I so much appreciate it. And your advocacy, Dave.
Any other questions? Barry?
Yeah, who else? Anyway, I want to thank you so much, Beth. I'm so proud that you are our treasurer. It makes such a big effect to me how competent and the innovative things that you offer. I'm very proud that you're in that position, and I'm glad you want to keep doing it. So I just wanted to thank you for that. I also, one of the things that strikes me is that there are a lot of players that are not just in government, that are not just in human services, that are not just nonprofit advocacy kind of groups. There's town planners, there's people who look at zoning or non-zoning, or, whether they approve the building of certain things. And I don't see them, included with their resources as part of the overall picture. And I wondered, they control a fair amount. I wondered how, or if that's already happening, or, shouldn't it be broader than just the usual people?
So absolutely, Barry. And, again, when we did clean water, we brought in farmers, we brought in folks that represented nonprofits, we brought in municipal folks, engineers, we brought in everyone into the process, as I say, 23 different meetings. And I learned from that. And the partners that I had, because we work very closely with natural resources, we work very closely with transportation as we were doing it, and we brought everybody together. Now, in housing, there are very much ways that we can do the same thing. As I said, we had a public hearing, and we went to some other hearings that the Senate had, and we're able to expound on some of our issues there. We need to bring in the same thing. We need to bring in the folks that are, as you said, town planners. We need to take a look at some of the resistance to affordable housing. I always hear, I'm all for it, but not in my backyard. And we need to take a look and say, how do we address those issues? We need to bring in developers as well. I had a meeting with some of the developers, and we talked about the gap between the cash flows that they have in housing and the cost of housing, and how do we bridge that gap and make it more successful so that nonprofits and private sector folks can get involved in our housing needs and do it in a way that meets our community needs. It's not all about profit. It's about getting to a reasonable profit and having reasonable and decent health care for every single person. And I think that that's where we've fallen short. So I would bring those folks in. We have, we're gonna do more of that as we move forward, because housing is one of my priorities in moving forward. And how and childcare is related to housing. It all comes together, again, those silos that you were talking about. And we've talked to childcare folks about how do we integrate that into housing. The other thing I'd say about housing is it needs social services associated with it and support systems. If you're an individual with disability, you need to have those services. If we're talking about homelessness, and we need desperately to take care of that problem, you need to have social services linked to that housing so that people can move forward. Some people, when they're looking at housing or putting down a deposit, can't do it because they don't have a decent credit rating. So how do we help folks? And Champlain Housing Trust, for instance, has done a lot of work on that. Other housing groups across the state. And how do we bridge the needs that they have so that they can have affordable housing and they can look for the future? One of the programs that we did in our office is called ABLE, Achieving a Better Life Experience. And it's a program for individuals with disabilities so that they can put money aside for the future. And it allows you to put money aside over the $2,000 limit that some of the social service and benefit programs have. And they can put in up to $15,000 a year, your relatives can. It does two things. One, it helps people get the dollars they need for a future, putting that down payment on an apartment, for instance. It also helps them with the services that they need, so they can have transportation services, they can have respite services, whatever it might be. And it also helps them in terms to plan for the future. My son works with individuals with disabilities in another state, and he told somebody about this program, and he said, now I can dream for the future. And I think that that's what we need, is to be able to bring all of our folks together and cross those barriers, just like we did in clean water. And I'm going to just say, again, Dan and Dave, thank you for your support of the clean water initiatives. And we did get funding for it. We were able to find ways to do that. And getting back to, that smart finance, we found a way to do clean water despite the price tag that was associated with it. And I'm proud of the fact that the state is moving forward on that. So we can do it in housing.
Thank you, Beth. Are there any other questions? No, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate the great work that you've been doing for us here in Vermont for such a long time. And we wish you the best, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you continue to be our state treasurer.
Well, again, so thank you. So yes, thank you. And what I said earlier, it is my greatest honor in my career of public service, and that's 43 years, to be your treasurer, and 17 years in the treasurer's office as deputy and treasurer. I love the job. I love the people. I love the issues. And I love that give and take and debate with the House and the Senate. Thank you, folks, for what you do. And thank you all for what your committee does. It's a pleasure to work with you. And thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to hear from Marissa Ovis, who is one of the Vermont Democratic Party organizers. She has Lamoille County, the Northeast Kingdom, and she's been working very hard to recruit volunteers to help work on the campaign and also to register new voters. Marissa, you ready?
Yes, I've never been more ready. It's great to see all of you. I've Zoom called with almost everyone, and if not, you will be receiving an email shortly, probably. Yeah, so and thank you, Beth, for speaking. Every time I hear you speak, I am filled with energy and purpose to continue working hard to elect folks like you. I mean, your passion is really, it really sinks in to organizers like me and voters like me. So I really appreciate all the work that you do. And yeah, for forever, really.
Thank you.
So, my role in the Vermont Democratic Party is to engage voters, to make sure people are registered to vote, they know how to vote, and they receive the information that they need. Especially in a time like this, the role has also taken on community building and creating spaces where people can come together, even over Zoom, to talk with one another, to figure out how to best navigate the election, how to make sure that our neighbors who are differently abled or older can get their ballots dropped off. So I won't take up too much of the time, but I'll introduce a few programs that I'm sure a few of you have, I've talked in your ear, talked your ear off about, but I'll do it again. So the first is that we are having a Lamoille County community meeting on Wednesday at 5:30. I'll put all the information in the chat. This is a space where people can come together, for those who are already elected, those who are thinking about running for office, those who are, teachers in the community, and speak about what we need to do for individuals. Because the Northeast Kingdom and Lamoille is so spread out, there are variable ways to approach connection and approach how to best engage volunteers and supporters. So this is a space to bring everyone together, and at all levels of the political spectrum. And the next thing I'm going to speak about is a program called Empower. This is a relational organizing technique, and relational organizing is essentially peer-to-peer. It's neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend. And this is an opportunity to speak with those people about the election. And, it can be very intimidating to speak to those who think differently politically. But that is not the entirety of the purpose of this app. One of the ways that this app is really important is to do voter identification, to see who is planning to vote Democrat, who is undecided, and who's undecided in each race. And then also to make sure that once we know who needs an extra push, we can target those folks and be leaders in our own communities, our own neighborhoods, to give that information. And then, when people are returning their ballots, we can't count on our government to make sure that the ballots are all counted. I mean, we see voter suppression even more, in really shocking amounts right now with the Trump administration. We saw this in the primaries, and we're going to continue to see it, especially in very blue states like Vermont. And so we need to make sure our votes are counted. So this is a way for people to list their contacts, check in, make sure that they have the information they need to vote, and to vote towards equitable systems, and vote for candidates like Beth. And then also to make sure that they know where to drop off their ballots, that they can reach out to someone if they're unable to drop off their ballots, that they are able to have the tools and resources to help their community members. And so that is a wonderful way to connect. And because, broadband in the Northeast Kingdom and Lamoille is not phenomenal, I know that a couple of my calls this morning were dropped. Folks can write down information They can fax it to me, call me on their landline. I can put them in the system. There are so many ways to get involved where you don't have to do phone banking and text banking. We know that in the Northeast Kingdom and Lamoille, the best way to connect is one-on-one, is to have those in-depth discussions, is to connect more deeply. And so, text banking may not work for our area. And so this is a really wonderful opportunity to bolster up the votes in Lamoille and the Northeast Kingdom. So that is my little spiel. And I also, for those of you who don't know me, I would love to connect and support you on your campaign. My goal is to take as much off your plate because you are working towards equity and inclusion, and I want to help you get there. I want to help send volunteers your way and have a coordinated effort into bolstering up the Democratic Party. So any way that I can help, any way that I can help mobilize volunteers or support the volunteers you already have, if there's any way I can host virtual events, I'm here to do that. So please reach out to me. It's my full-time job to support you all. So please put a lot on my plate, make my job enormously time consuming. I look forward to it. Thank you so much. If anyone has questions also, you can either say them now, I don't know how much time we have, or email me. I will put all that information in the chat.
Thank you, Marissa. Anybody have any questions that they need? Okay, not seeing anything, then this will conclude our streaming portion of our meeting, and we'll go now into the business part of our meeting tonight. So, Beth, I thank you. Tim, I thank you. I don't think you really don't need to stick around for this, but we appreciate